By the late 19th century, the Ottoman Empire was in deep decline. Weakened by debt, uprisings, and territorial losses in the Balkans. The Russo-Turkish War of 1877–78 reshaped the region and secured independence for several Balkan states, but it also created friction among the great powers. The Treaty of Berlin rolled back Russian influence by returning much of Macedonia to Ottoman rule, leaving none of the regional players satisfied. The early 20th century brought even more upheaval. The Young Turk Revolution of 1908 attempted to modernize and strengthen the empire. Yet Austria-Hungary's annexation of Bosnia, Bulgaria's declaration of independence, and renewed unrest in Albania and Crete intensified the crisis. At the same time, the Balkan states suffered their own coups and struggled to control powerful nationalist militaries that demanded territorial expansion. By 1910, both the Ottomans and their neighbors were unstable, and the Balkans became a region full of tension and conflict. Outlining research papers, fact-checking information, or brainstorming ideas for videos like this one can be a time-consuming and expensive activity, especially for students, business owners, or creators who might not have the luxury of an assistant or a fully staffed team to handle these sorts of tasks. That's why we use the sponsor of today's video, Merlin AI, an online platform that takes the best elements of some of the top AI writing and research tools available and compacts them into a free Chrome extension. Merlin AI integrates right into your workflow and gives you instant access to the best AI models available. A standalone tool like ChatGPT costs $20 a month for access to a single model. But with Merlin AI, you get all the major models like OpenAI, Claude, and Gemini for all about $5 a month after a 75% discount. Merlin AI can offer these savings because they purchase API credits in bulk from providers and pass the savings directly to users like you. And since most of us don't use $20 worth of API monthly, you're only paying for what you actually use. If you need an AI-powered tool for your projects and want access to multiple models at a fraction of the cost, click our link in the description and use code AH5 at checkout to sign up for Merlin AI today before this discount disappears. As the Balkans and the Ottoman Empire faced turmoil, Italy saw it as the opportune moment to expand its empire. Traditionally, Britain, France, and later Germany had supported the Ottoman Empire to prevent a total collapse. But now, they allowed Italy to attack and occupy Ottoman Libya and the Dodecanese Islands. Watching closely, the Serbian and Bulgarian governments began alliance talks in the fall of 1911, just after the Italo-Turkish War began, and in March of 1912, they agreed on an alliance that assigned northern Macedonia to Serbia and southern Macedonia to Bulgaria, but part was considered a dispute zone that could be assigned after the war with Russian arbitration. Soon after, Montenegro and Greece joined with separate agreements, and the Balkan League was born. However, Bulgaria refused to commit to a final division of territorial gains during the agreements, confident that its army could seize the most valuable lands. Bulgaria was militarily the most powerful of the four Balkan states, with a large, well-trained, well-equipped army. Greece was considered the weakest of the three main allies, since it fielded the smallest army and had suffered a defeat against the Ottomans 16 years earlier. But it was also the only Balkan country to possess a formidable navy, which was vital for the League in preventing Ottoman reinforcements from being rapidly transferred by ship between Asia and Europe. The Balkan League planned to attack the Ottomans together, but on October 8, 1912, Montenegro attacked ahead of schedule to get the jump on Serbia, setting off the First Balkan War. The rest of the Balkan League members quickly followed. Ottoman Grand Vizier Ahmed Muhtar Pasha wanted to save the peace, and even demobilized part of the Ottoman Third Army in the province of Thrace. But the Young Turks running the government wanted to fight. Many observers misread the balance and underestimated the League. The empire's population of 24 million was more than twice the League's combined 10 million. And on paper, the Ottomans could field 600,000 soldiers. The Ottomans had also gained experience fighting the Italians and rebels in Albania and Macedonia. However, just over 6 million lived in what still remained of Ottoman Europe, many of whom were Orthodox Christians and considered unfit for conscription. The poor transport network of the empire's Asian regions meant that the only reliable way to move large numbers of troops to the front was by sea, where they'd be vulnerable to attacks from the Greek fleet. In addition, the Ottomans were still at war with the Italians over 1912, who had already overrun Ottoman Libya and by now were invading the Dodecanese Islands. Though the Ottoman Empire and Italy made peace by this point, the war had prevented the Ottomans from reinforcing their position in the Balkans. Many of their best officers, like Mustafa Kemal and Enver Bey, were stuck in Libya, and the reserve troops were badly trained and equipped. The Ottoman navy was weak, and the army only had 315,000 men in Europe. Furthermore, the Ottomans' military capabilities were hampered by several factors, such as domestic strife caused by the Young Turks Revolution and the counter-revolutionary coup several months later. This resulted in different groups competing for influence within the military. A German mission had tried to reorganize the army, but its recommendations had not been fully implemented. Also, several of the army's best battalions had been transferred to Yemen to face an ongoing rebellion. The Balkan League could count on 825,000 soldiers, 350,000 Bulgarians, 230,000 Serbs, 200,000 Greeks, and 45,000 Montenegrins. Most of the soldiers were peasant conscripts, equipped with a variety of European weapons, including French and German artillery and a few observation aircraft. The Greek navy, with 16 destroyers and an armored cruiser, ensured control of the Aegean Sea. By October 8th, Crete, which had been de facto aligned with Greece since 1908, was under Greek control, though its official union with the kingdom would not be recognized until 1913. In early October 1912, 3 Bulgarian armies faced the Ottoman First Army in eastern Thrace. The Ottomans thought the Bulgarians would move on Macedonia and concentrated their troops there, but the Bulgarians sent the bulk of their units toward the fortress towns of Edirne and Kirkkaleeza on the road to the Ottoman capital of Constantinople. At the Battle of Kirkkaleeza, the outnumbered Ottomans fought for 3 days before the Bulgarians broke their lines. The Bulgarians could have completely smashed the Ottoman army if they had pursued, but instead they paused to reorganize while the Ottomans rushed in reinforcements, restoring discipline. On October 29th, the Bulgarians attacked the Ottoman defensive positions at Luli Burgas. At first, the Ottomans held firm, their artillery hammering Bulgarian infantry as waves of men pressed against their lines. But when ammunition began to run short, the Bulgarians gradually gained the upper hand in brutal close-quarters fighting across the trenches and fields. By the end, each side had suffered about 20,000 casualties, making it the bloodiest battle in Europe since the Franco-Prussian War in 1871. The Ottomans fell back to the Kadalka line, just 18 miles or 30 kilometers from Constantinople, where exhausted survivors regrouped. The Ottomans requested an armistice, but Tsar Ferdinand of Bulgaria refused and kept the decision secret from his allies. On November 17th, the Bulgarians launched an assault against the Kadalka defenses, but fierce Ottoman resistance, overstretched supply lines, and the spread of cholera stopped their advance. Meanwhile, in Macedonia, Serbian forces came up against Ottoman resistance quicker than expected at Kumanovo. The Serbs outnumbered the Ottoman army almost 2-1, but the Ottomans launched the first attacks on October 23rd, and the Serbs had to counterattack at great cost. In the end, the Serbian artillery overpowered the Ottomans, and the Serbs won the battle. The victory left the Serbs in possession of the part of Macedonia disputed with the Balkans and routed the Ottomans, who fled south. The Serbs pursued them further, leading to confrontations at the battles of Prilep and Bitola. The defeated Ottomans were then pushed into southern Albania. Later, Serbian forces joined Montenegrins at Scutari, captured Novi Pazar and Prizren, and faced Albanian resistance in Kosovo. Meanwhile, the Greeks made straight for Salonika, which the Bulgarians also desired. Having prioritized it over Macedonia, the Greeks surrounded the port city on November 7th. A Bulgarian division rushed south, and the commander sent a message ahead asking the Ottomans to surrender to him instead of the Greeks. But it was too late. The capture of Salonika on November 8th was a critical League victory, as Ottoman forces were now completely cut off from any hope of reinforcement. After taking Salonika, Greek and Bulgarian troops began an uneasy occupation. In the west, Greek troops also besieged the Ottoman fortress at Ioannina. As the Balkan League armies advanced, the Christian and Muslim civilian population suffered from atrocities committed by all sides. This was made worse by the presence of irregular forces that blurred the line between soldiers and civilians. Constantinople was filled with hundreds of thousands of Muslim refugees, with even the Hagia Sophia being turned into a cholera hospital. The great powers sent warships to Constantinople to protect the city's Christian population from potential revenge killings by Muslims. In just a few weeks, the Balkan League had put together a string of decisive victories. Nearly all of Ottoman Europe was now under their control, except for a few holdout fortresses. As a result of the Ottoman collapse, an Albanian group, supported by Austria and Italy, declared independence on November 28th. On December 3rd, the Ottomans signed an armistice with Bulgaria, Montenegro, and Serbia, but Greek military operations continued. The Balkan League was victorious on all fronts, but despite the armistice, the war was not over, and the great powers were being drawn ever closer into the conflict. Even though the Ottoman armies were beaten in the field, and its fleet was bottled up by the Greek navy, they still held important fortresses, along with the Catalca line, and had more reserves in Asia. The Balkan League was divided over the possible spoils, but the Ottomans had no allies to help them take advantage of the situation. This time, the great powers would not support the Ottomans as they had in the past, and declared they would accept border changes in favor of the League. Even Austria-Hungary said Vienna would not oppose Serbian expansion except for an Adriatic port. Russia was now worried the Bulgarians might actually get to Constantinople before them, and urged restraint. The events in the Balkans had also pushed Europe to the brink of war. On November 21st, Austria-Hungary acted to prevent Serbia from permanently occupying the Adriatic coast. Vienna mobilized 6 army corps, with 3 facing the Balkans and 3 facing Russia. Kaiser Wilhelm secretly assured the Austrians that if Russia mobilized, Germany would support the Habsburgs, just as he would do in July 1914. In response to Austro-Hungarian moves, the Russian Tsar held a meeting with his war council, and the army drew up plans for a partial mobilization. The court decided not to mobilize, partly out of fear of provoking Germany, and partly because some ministers didn't want to risk war over Serbian access to the sea. The German government did not know how close the Russians had come to mobilizing when they held their own war council meeting on December 8th. Following the war scare and the December armistice, 2 parallel conferences took place in London on December 16th and 17th, 1912. Ottoman delegate Rashid Pasha said that his government would give up Macedonia and Salonika, but not Erdina, Eastern Thrace, or the 4 islands at the mouth of the Dardanelles that Greece was demanding. The Ottomans also insisted on an independent Albania. The Bulgarians made a new demand for Edirne to compensate for lands they might lose to the Serbs, but it was a particular sticking point as the fortress city was important for the safety of Constantinople. The Greeks and Bulgarians argued over who would get Salonika, while the Serbs and Bulgarians argued over Macedonia. For the great powers, the main topic was the borders of Albania, something that was of critical importance for Austria-Hungary to limit Serbian power. The diplomatic talks did not put an end to the chaos in Constantinople, as on January 23, 1913, a Young Turk government took power again after yet another coup and the murder of the war minister Nazim Pasha. Supported by influential Turkish officers, many of whom came from the Balkan lands that were now lost, they decided to continue the war to prevent the loss of Thrace. Ottoman troops, including Mustafa Kemal, landed at Gallipoli on February 7th. At first, they pushed the Bulgarians back around Bolair. But the Bulgarians rallied, and the Ottoman attack failed with the loss of 6,000 dead to just 114 Bulgarians. Meanwhile, the Greeks took Ioannina on March 6th, and the Bulgarians and Serbians finally captured Iderna on March 26th. At Scutari, Serbian troops arrived to help the Montenegrins, who, ignoring warnings from the Great Powers, assaulted the city. A combined fleet of the powers blockaded Montenegro, causing the Serbs to leave, but the Montenegrins managed to take the city on April 24th, only to agree to give it up to a future independent Albania just days later. The Ottomans had no choice but to accept a peace deal, and the belligerents signed the Treaty of London on May 30th, 1913, which reduced Ottoman Europe to a small strip of land outside of Constantinople and created the Principality of Albania. The First Balkan War came to an end in May of 1913, and the Ottoman Empire in Europe seemed to be irrevocably defeated. But the borders between the victorious Balkan League members were another matter altogether. Even before the First Balkan War had come to an end, further conflict was brewing. Thanks again to Merlin AI for sponsoring this video. If you need an AI-powered tool for your projects and want access to multiple models at a fraction of the cost, click our link in the description and use code AH5 at checkout to sign up for Merlin AI today before the discount disappears.